So, welcome back to my show, Michael Brue, Real Estate Unlocked. Today we have a pretty cool guest, which is actually a good friend of mine, Matthew Goodrich, and he is a local real estate broker, and I affectionately refer to him as the grinder because he is the guy that will get it done. So, Matt, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you, pal. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm super excited about being a part of this today.
Absolutely. So what I figured is who better than to ask you, let's just jump in like right in the show.
Sure.
So one of the things I'd like to talk about is who better to know than you, because you work with so many buyers and I see you finding people their homes when nobody else can find what somebody's looking for, or you found it and you win the bid. So one of the things I want to do in just a minute is, what will you share with us, or some of the tips and strategies that other agents that could possibly learn from to help land their particular client on these properties that are not so hard to find yet, but so hard to win the bid. Most of the properties, I would say, in the 500,000 and less categories are sometimes have 12 to 16 other offers on them, and you seem to be winning the bid.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that, Mike. Have you heard that joke about the police officer pulling over the person for speeding? So the police officer pulls the person over for speeding, and he goes over to the car. The person winds down the window. The police officer pulls down his glasses and looks at the person and says, "Show me your real estate license." Everybody and their mother has a real estate license. So to me, the key is developing credibility. And that starts with the first conversation you have with your buyers and building a good rapport. Because the buyers out there today, they kind of have an idea of what they want, and with all the information they have at their fingertips, they are pretty educated. So the key is that you know a little more than they do, and that's a great way to develop rapport. And to me, what I try to do is, whether a person is looking to buy tomorrow or 6 months from now, I try to make them the best buyer they can be when they are ready to buy.
Okay. Well, that is certainly why I invited you here, because I know this has been your strategy, is that connecting, that personal connection and credibility with the other agents. And I think that's like super important.
Exactly. Because you know what? The fact of the matter is that, lots of people think it may be a quick close that they're looking for. But the fact of the matter may be that person may need more time. So what I like to do whenever I go into a listing and I'm with my buyers, obviously I want to walk around my buyers and make sure that they know that I care about what their needs are. But at the same time, I'm also trying to connect with that other agent to make sure that I know what they're looking for if my clients want to put an offer in. Because you know what, at the end of the day, there may be 10 or 12 other offers. You got to make yours stand out. And I think that little time that you have in there in the property is your time to shine.
Well, so before we jump into a couple of these bullet pointed nuggets that I think you're going to release for our audience today, Matt, I know you. We've been friends for a long time. We always have each other's back. We've worked out together. I think you've seen me at my absolute worst. I think you've seen me at my best. I remember a couple times you picking me up off the floor and just kind of helping me regain my moment, if you will.
Mojo.
But what I'd like to do is maybe you could look into the camera and speak to our people and let them know, what are you willing to share with them about you? Like, if they're just looking to get to know you, who are you?
Sure.
What would you share at this point?
Well, my slogan is "In Matt We Trust," and one thing that I think is ultra important is that you're available. I know there's a lot of people that say, "Hey, you need your time for this and that." I just, there's a lot of great real estate agents out there. Lots of great real estate agents, and I haven't been in the game as long as you have, Mike, or other people that may be watching, other agents that may be watching this. And I think the key is that that you are available and you can go see things and you work around the people's times that they're looking for. I make sure to let the people that I work with know that, hey, the times you're looking for, I'm going to make happen. So, and I care about all my clients, and honestly, they become my friends. So I think that happens when you uphold your end of the bargain and you're super professional and consistent. Only good things can come.
Okay. Well, I think we're giving them a really good view on who you are, and not just who you are in business, but also kind of who you are, personally, and who you are to me. So I'd like to get into painting the picture, if you will. I'd like to do this with our audience.
Sure.
Yeah. I'd like to share with them, like, directly, these are some of the things that we're facing right now as real estate professionals.
Yeah.
The price points obviously come into play. So
Yeah.
I think I think it's really important to gauge when you're in the up to 500,000 price range. We are finding that most of the people, this is where they're generally going to fall for what they can afford. So some are approved for 400, some are approved for 500, some are even approved for 300. But in that market, I would say up to 500 in that price point, it is super tough.
It is indeed.
We're finding, and I'm assuming this is the same for you, that most of the time when you do find that particular home and you make that offer, you're competing with somewhere between 12 and 16 other people.
Absolutely.
I remember one listing that I actually had 22 offers within 24 hours.
Wow.
By the way, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Making sure that you do everything right and you get back to everybody. But there is going to be definite strategies to help with this. I find the 500 to 800,000 price range is a little slimmer. So we actually, you almost have a little bit better of a selection. And actually, we could probably tighten that up a little bit. Let's call that between like 600 and 800,000, because you're in now in a jumbo category for a mortgage. A lot less people are going to qualify. There's just going to be less buyers circulating in that pool.
Sure.
But then strangely enough, don't you find this? Anything over $1 million, we're in like a whole new market. We have more cash in the $1 million plus market than we've had in the last 20 years. Getting cash influx into the market right now for $1 million plus properties, $1 million homes, $2 million homes, $5 million homes. It goes back to there's going to be a whole nother strategy for them, because there is also an abundance of buyers who are looking to move from all the different states down here to Florida.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to primarily focus on our first price range, which is like up to 500,000 when we're sharing with people today. Sure. So, Matt, when you find that particular home, what are some of the strategies that you would, discuss with a buyer to gain their confidence that you could share with us to make sure that they win the bid or have a really good chance at winning the bid?
Absolutely. Well, like I said earlier, when we first in the intro, making my buyer the best buyer they can be is really prepping them for when that time comes, for when they find that property that they really want. But obviously, one of the first things is making sure they're pre-approved and using a local mortgage broker. I think Group 1, Mike Raviccio, he's really good. He's a local guy I love to use. And, when you have a local person that knows the market, a local mortgage broker that knows the market, that makes the listing agent feel a little more comfortable than, say, a bank per se, because with a bank, there's no like motivation to see your loan go through like it would be with a local mortgage broker.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and actually specifically Michael, because I had this happen. This was a pretty unique situation. This doesn't happen all the time, but it's exactly what you just said. Encouraging our buyers to use local people that are known in our local market to obtain a mortgage could actually help, and in this case it did. This case, there was about 7 offers on the property, and each one of them I knew were going to come in pretty solid, because the buyers are getting educated and they know they're going to have to pay full price, or in most cases right now, over the asking price. And we, of course, used Michael on this particular deal, Michael Raviccio with Group 1, Supreme Lending, and the other agent told me, we actually chose your offer, not only because it was the strongest offer, but also we knew the local lender, and we know that he's known in our town for getting it done. So that's actually a great point. Yeah. I never even thought of that. I just shared it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the bare minimum first step, but that's a conversation even before you get to that property that the buyer wants. I think the next step is the agent connecting with the other agent. I pick up a lot of people that have worked with previous agents and they just lost out. And I find a lot of times they lose out because that agent isn't connecting with that other agent and letting them know that they can get their people to the finish line. I think anybody can get something under contract. I mean, it's managing your client's expectations on the buyer side that can make a big difference and take a lot of pressure off that listing agent.
You mentioned to me in one of our, I think it might have been during a workout where we were just kind of being casual and going back and forth. You had mentioned about connecting with the other realtor to find out the rules of engagement. Like, what does their seller actually want in terms? And I thought that was kind of brilliant.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. Well, I think the key is that you want to make sure that the other side knows that you're competent and something about you, whether it be knowing the terms or them knowing you're using a local guy, that you will stand out a little more. I mean, because the fact of the matter is that when you're in a multiple offer situation, you've got to do different things, and if you don't, then you're going to be left behind. So I find that finding those terms that make that other side happy, them knowing that you're using the right people and you know how to manage expectations, will make your offer stand out. On top of that, I think the next thing would be a strong deposit. I'm a big believer in a strong deposit.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think when you put a strong deposit down, and, in Florida we use as-is contracts, and it's totally refundable within your inspection period time, I like to show the people that my people are serious about buying that property. So that's important to me.
Okay, I like that. So in a lot of people don't know this, but whatever you do put down in a deposit, you are going to get applied to the purchase price, or it's going to be refunded back if it was more than they actually ended up putting down. So sharing this with everybody to come as big as you can with a big deposit, I think it says you're serious.
Exactly. And you know what? And when they see that you're putting so much money down, I think that they see that you really want the house. And I think the next thing past that is having the right people as far as like inspectors, because when, a lot of times you're dealing with people that haven't purchased, and when we're talking about this price range, this may be their first home purchase or the second one. So they're not, up to par on all the lingo and the terminology that we may loosely use, as far as like escrow, all these different terms. So, when you use a inspector, you want to make sure that you use an inspector that knows how to explain things to the potential buyer.
Ooh, that's a good one. And I don't think we talk about that enough, because the reality is we want to use an inspector that will find everything, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
We want them to go through
Sure.
and uncover every possible thing that could happen or what might need to be done on a property. But I also think they need to explain the second half of it, which is not a big deal in most cases. Even if you find something like termites, well, newsflash, we live in the tropics.
Yeah.
Termites are like everywhere.
Absolutely.
They're
Yeah.
actually either in the house,
Yeah.
they're near the house, or they're down the block. And if you find them, if you're lucky enough to find them, then it's the curability. So what we need is that inspector is going to come in and be able to explain, yes, I found them, but it's not a big deal. Now we can talk about the curability, because sometimes you're going to need to include both the seller and the buyer and then bring them back together on how do we get this cured.
Exactly. And so, when you put all those pieces together and you sell that to the listing agent, it helps for your offer to pop out, but you always will fight, a lot of times, sadly, we deal with a lot of listing agents, bringing a buyer to the table. And, I think, honestly, I'm not a big fan of that, because, a lot of times I run into these buyers that only want to work with the listing agent. Well, on one possible transaction, there's 12 different negotiating points within that transaction. So honestly, when a buyer wants to work with the listing agent, you're always going to be on the back seat of the deal, because honestly, even though we're a transaction broker, which means that there certain duties and loyalties are shared, I find that if you really won't save money like you think you will, then when you're working with a good buyer's agent that knows how to negotiate hard and has your best interest at heart.
And comb through each of those 12 points that you so intimately working on that
Exactly.
buyer side. So that's a great point. Matt, before we transition, obviously, if there's anything more you're willing to share, I know that you probably have some weapon strategy on how to make you make your buyers the absolute best choice.
Yeah, I just, what, Mike, I really think it comes down to, I remember this older gentleman many years ago told me the 7 P's of business. Prior proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. And you know what? It's having those, knowing the back end problems and dealing with them in the upfront conversations helps the transaction to be much smoother. I find when you're not having the right conversations with your clients, then problems arise. And I think if you have the right conversations before problems arise, it's going to make things a lot easier to deal with when things do. And I find that when you know how to handle your clients, you get to the finish line a lot easier.
Yeah, well, you do that well, Matt, because you're
thank you,
kind of
Mike.
known for getting into a deep relationship with your clients who do choose you to hire you, and they'll have a deeper trust and understanding of what you're actually saying because they know that you're coming from a point of like you want to help and you want to come from contribution.
For sure. And, and honestly, I keep my circle really tight, and you're one of those people. So when you have a couple great people that you can come to and talk to about different things, it makes it easier for you to give the right advice at the right time.
I think it helps. I want to go off script for a minute.
Okay.
I don't even know what kind of time we have remaining.
Sure.
But I want to hit you with something that is probably going to be like left field for you.
Okay.
But you are a master of this. So in closing or before we go, is there anything you can share with our audience about how you stay so positive and how you cement your mindset in no matter what curveballs come your way, no matter what challenges you face, you're always on the up, because that's one of the things that I admire about you. You are always, doesn't matter what's being thrown at you, you're always going to just rise again. You're going to keep coming and you're going to stay up.
I appreciate you saying that, Mike. Well, I give God all the credit, but you know what? When you're in the business that we're in, you're an independent contractor. So you know what? You everything rises and falls on yourself. So the key is that you hold yourself accountable, and you got to be your biggest cheerleaders. Sometimes you're going to be holding those pom-poms, and rooting for yourself, because that's what you're going to need, because you're going to have your good days and your bad days. And, your bad days are going to teach you lessons. And, the key is that you always learn. I'm always looking, Michael Jackson, for instance, he had a song, Man in the Mirror. I tend to look at myself first before I start blaming anyone else. So when you look at yourself and you figure out what you did wrong, so possibly that wouldn't happen again, it helps you to become a little bit better each and every time. None of us are going to be 100%, but the key is, the only beauty I say in getting older is that you get a little wiser. So that scenario helps with that. And what I try to do is I try to continually work on myself. I think it's a really good thing when you get to know who you are in life, and you build and you grow. And when you do those things, actually, what happens is your business will grow, because John Maxwell, he has a saying. It says you can only rise to the limitation of your character. So what happens is in life, whenever things arise, you can only get so high, because what ends up happening is your character can start to break in different areas. So I try to build myself up so that I can continue to go up, because things are going to come left, right, up, down, and so you have to be ready when those times come. So you have to be your biggest cheerleader and self-motivate.
Yeah, and you are just an animal with those things. So I figure who better to hear from than those specific things, because that is so true, right? Like, so the market has been just kind of bonkers for the last 2 years now. I think we're going on 2 years.
For sure.
Completely nuts, and a lot of that's been amazing.
And I think, honestly, having good energy, I'm an energy person, and I think it's good to throw out positive energy, especially when you're meeting your buyers for the first time.
Yeah.
If you got a great, pep in your step, so to speak, I think it's a little bit contagious, and it definitely helps. And to be optimistic, and I think if you're a little more optimistic than pessimistic, I think you may have a better opportunity when you're connecting with that other agent as well.
I think that's fantastic. Really is. Matt, I would like to personally say thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's a privilege to be next to you, Mike.
You've been awesome. You've been awesome
Thank
for
you,
me
pal.
personally.
Yeah, I
but
appreciate that.
Now we got to
Vice
share
versa.
a little bit with...
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be a part of this, and hopefully some of the little tidbits I gave were helpful.
And you know what, Matt, I think there is a lot of people that would choose different real estate professionals, and I think you're an excellent choice. How would people that see this, if they want to choose you to work with here in the Jupiter, Palm Beach Gardens, Martin County, Port St. Lucie counties, how would they get in contact with you? Like,
Sure,
what is the
sure.
contact information?
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. I think before anyone really wants to work with a realtor, I think they should go online and Google their name and go on like realtor.com, for instance. They have a profile, kind of shows their sales and stuff like that. So yeah, just go on Google, type in Matthew Goodrich, realtor, and look me up. And I think that's a great way for whether you work with me or work with someone else. I think the key is that you know what they've done in the past and what people have to say. So I'm a big believer in Googling.
All right. So we just heard from Humble Matt. That's powerful.
Yeah, awesome.
I appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you, pal. Thank you,
All
Mike.
right. That's a wrap. Thank you guys for coming on the show. Michael Brue, Real Estate Unlocked. We'll see you next week.